I spent 70 years protecting a house key that didn't open any door, but it was the only thing standing between our family and a truth that could break us. You see this old brass key? The one that's hung by my back door since before you were born? Tonight, I'm going to tell you what it really guarded. Because the secret it protected is written in an unseen letter, and once you hear the words inside it, you will never look at this family, or this house, the same way again. I won't be around forever. And some stories, if you don't tell them in time, don't just die, they rot. They turn into quiet eyes at the dinner table, and half-finished sentences, and that feeling that something has always been just a little off. So listen closely. By the time this night is over, you'll know why an ordinary house key was treated like a crown jewel, why it didn't belong to any door that still exists, and what was written in the letter it was sworn to protect. And yes, we are going to open that secret, line by line. Have you ever held something that felt heavier than it looked, as if all the unsaid things in a family had soaked into it? That's what this key became for us. Let me start with what you already know. In this house, we have rules. Some were silly. No shoes on the good rug. No banging the screen door. No whistling after dark because your grandfather said it invited trouble. But there was one rule that wasn't silly. Not to me. Not to any of us. The key stays on the wall. That was the rule. The key hangs on an old wooden hook just beside the back door, under that black and white photograph of a crooked little house with 3 steps and a leaning porch, my childhood home. You've seen it your whole life. We hung the dog's leash just under it. We checked it like other people check the stove. The key was never to go into play kitchens or treasure hunts. Not into dress-up games, not onto necklaces. If a child took it down, someone's voice would snap through the air. Put the key back. Not angry. Not loud. Just sharp. The kind of sharp that makes your fingers tingle where they've disobeyed. When I was little, I thought it was made of gold. It isn't. It's just brass, worn smooth where so many thumbs have rubbed it, like a worry stone. The teeth at the end are blunt, as if they don't quite match any lock you've ever seen. And they don't. Because the truth is, this key doesn't belong to any door that still exists. It never has, not in your lifetime. But that didn't stop us from treating it like an heirloom diamond. Doesn't that seem strange to you, an entire family building rituals around a key that opens nothing? When I was 7 years old, I made the mistake of asking that question out loud. It was summertime, and the house smelled like sliced tomatoes and hot dust. Your great-grandmother Rose was standing by the sink, snapping green beans into a metal bowl, the way she always did when she was thinking. The screen door was singing its little spring song every time a fly bounced against it. I was sitting at the table swinging my legs, watching the sunlight hit that old photograph. In the picture, the house looked smaller, like it was bowing under the weight of all the years. The key hung from a little nail driven right through the frame. I squinted at it. The key had always seemed too big for such a tiny nail, too important for such a casual place. Mom? I said. Why do we have to leave the key there? She didn't turn around right away. I remember the sound first, snap, drop, green beans hitting metal. Then she said, lightly, so we don't lose it, Evie. But it doesn't go to anything, I insisted. I tried it on the front door and it wouldn't go in. And the shed, and the basement, and the... Her hand froze over the bowl. Several unsnapped beans tumbled in, whole. She set the bowl down carefully, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned. There was something in her eyes I didn't have a word for yet, something like a draft under a closed door. It doesn't go to any door that still exists, she said. Her voice was gentle, but final. It belonged to the old house. Before, this one. But why do we keep it? I pushed. There's no old house anymore. She crossed the kitchen and touched the key with her fingertips the way some people touch a cross in church. Some doors stay locked whether the house is standing or not, she said quietly. This key reminds us of that. Have you ever heard an adult say something that felt like it meant two things at once, and you knew you were only being allowed to understand the smaller half? That was one of those moments. I shut my mouth, but the question never really left. It just went underground, the way questions do in families like ours. Years passed. We moved that key and that photograph 3 different times, whenever the wallpaper peeled, whenever a new coat of paint went up, whenever the table shifted. But the arrangement never changed. The picture of the old house. The key hanging from the nail just driven into the top of the frame. The rule, the key stays on the wall. Boyfriends came and went. Your grandfather came and stayed. You were born and learned to toddle across this very floor. And every time a small hand reached up curiously toward that bit of brass and history, someone, your dad, your aunt, me, would say it again without even thinking. Put the key back. We said it like we were protecting the key. But really, the key was protecting something else. So why am I telling you this now, after you've lived your whole life under this roof with that key like an extra member of the family? Because 3 weeks ago, I woke up on the kitchen floor with the taste of metal in my mouth and your grandfather shouting my name like it was a prayer and a curse all at once. The doctors called it a warning. A tiny stroke. A brush with the edge. They kept me overnight for observation in a room that smelled like antiseptic and lemon. Machines hummed. My heart drew its little electric mountains on paper. And in that hospital bed, I stared at the blank television screen and all I could see was that key. Not the house. Not the people. Just that bit of brass, dangling from its nail, heavy with a story I'd been too afraid to tell. Have you ever realized you've been holding your breath for half a century? When the nurse came in to check my blood pressure, she said, "You're lucky, you know. You've got time. Not everyone gets a warning. Time. That's what I've been bargaining with all these years. Not yet, I'd tell myself. They're too young. Your mother's still alive. Your aunt can't handle it. Let it wait until after the holidays. After the graduation. After the wedding." But lying there in that sterile bed, I understood something simple and brutal. One day, someone would take that key off the wall to box up this house. And if I didn't speak first, the letter it was guarding would have the final word. I couldn't bear the idea of you discovering it alone, without a voice to guide you through every cracked line and every painful kindness baked into it. So I made up my mind. When I came home, I would choose one night. I would sit you all down at this table, the same table where my mother once snapped her green beans and told me that some doors stay locked, and I would unlock the one I have been guarding all my life. And that night is tonight. You look nervous. You're twisting your fingers the way your father used to when he had to give a book report. It's all right. Secrets are heavy before they're spoken. Let me pour us some tea. Good. Now, before I show you the letter, you need to understand the key. Not just what it looks like, but where it came from. Because if you don't understand the key, you won't understand why anyone would go to such lengths to hide words on paper. Long before this house, long before the wallpaper you've peeled at the corners, there was another house. You've seen it in the photograph. 1 story, paint peeling, porch slanting just enough to make you walk carefully. That was where I was born. In that house lived my grandmother Lillian, her 2 daughters, my mother Rose and my Aunt Anna, and, eventually, a smell of something that would never quite wash out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The key originally belonged to that house. It was the key to the front door, back when locks were simple and trust was complicated. Every morning, my grandmother would twist it in the lock with a sound like a throat clearing, and every evening she'd do the same. I remember standing on the step, holding her skirt, watching her close us in for the night. The porch light would cast our shadows long and thin against the yard. She would say, "There now. Safe as houses." Isn't it funny, the lies we tell just to fall asleep? The key was important then because it kept the world out. But the world has a way of slipping past doors. By the time I was 3, the old lock had been replaced with a new one, shiny and stubborn, with a smaller, modern key that sat in a dish by the door. The old brass key no longer fit. It spun uselessly in the air if you tried it. Most people would have tossed it into a drawer. Melted it down, maybe. But not my grandmother. She moved it to a nail in the kitchen, right above a new framed photograph she'd had taken of the house, while it still had its dignity, as she said. In the picture, the porch closest to giving up looked almost proud under the photographer's cloudy sky. She bought a cheap wooden frame down at the drugstore, slid the photo in, and then, this part one don't remember, but I have imagined it so many times it feels like a memory, she flipped the frame over, stared at the brown cardboard backing, and made a decision. Have you ever watched someone decide to keep a secret, right in front of you, without knowing that's what you were seeing? The first time I really knew the key was strange was the day Aunt Anna came home with a suitcase. I was 4. The suitcase was green, with a broken handle, and it banged against her leg as she climbed the porch steps. She was wearing a blue dress that didn't quite fit, like she'd borrowed it from someone bigger. Her face looked older than my mother's, but her eyes didn't. They were wide and red at the edges, like she'd been crying for a long time and had decided suddenly to stop. She smelled like hospital soap and the orange candy they give you when you've been very, very good. Grandmother Lillian met her at the door, took the suitcase from her hand, and kissed her forehead without saying hello. That kiss lasted exactly 1 second too long to be ordinary. Go lie down, she said softly. We'll talk later. I don't remember seeing a baby. Not that day. But that night, long after I was supposed to be asleep, I woke up to the sound of women's voices in the kitchen, low, tight, breaking, mending. I crept down the hallway, bare feet finding the cracks in the boards I'd been warned not to step on. There, in the yellow circle of the table lamp, sat my grandmother, my mother Rose, and Aunt Anna. On the table between them lay 3 things. That old brass key. A sheet of paper. And the photograph of the house, face down, its empty frame backing looking like a small, blank gravestone. I don't know how long I stood there in the dark listening. Long enough to hear words like shame and reputation and no choice. Long enough to hear my aunt say, with a crack in her voice that made me feel like the air itself had split. But she's my baby. My mother answered, she'll still be your baby. She'll just call you Aunt. There was a silence, heavy and terrible. Then the sound of paper sliding, of a pen scratching. Write it now, my grandmother said. Before you change your mind. I didn't understand then. I only knew there was some invisible storm passing straight through our kitchen. And that old key sat between them like a promise and a threat. The next morning, the photograph of the house hung on the kitchen wall in its frame, looking exactly the same as always. The key dangled from the little nail hammered into the top of the frame. If you hadn't been there the night before, you would never have guessed anything was different. But something was. Behind the photograph, between the cardboard backing and the thin slice of air my grandmother had carved with a razor blade, lay a folded letter. The ink was still wet. Of course, as a child, I didn't know that. All I knew was that from that day on, the rule about the key changed. It wasn't just, don't lose it. It was, don't touch it. If my hand even drifted toward that bit of brass, my mother's voice would come faster than thought. Evie. No. Not frightened. Not angry. Just, absolute. Children don't need explanations to understand when a line must not be crossed. We feel it, the way animals feel weather. So I didn't touch the key. We all didn't touch the key. But we all touched the secret it was holding, every day, without knowing it, every time we said the word, mother, to one woman and aunt to another. Now, let me fill in a piece of the puzzle your young ears weren't meant to hear back then. By the time I was old enough to ride my bike around the block, the story had already hardened into a polite, unspoken fact. Rose, that's the woman you called Grandma, could not have children. Her younger sister, Anna, was the wild one, always laughing, always staying out late, always bringing home songs from dances and the smell of cigarettes she swore she didn't smoke. In the late 1940s, a girl like that walked a thin line. People didn't say choices back then. They said mistakes. One summer, while Rose and her husband were still hoping and trying and visiting doctors in the city, Anna made a mistake with a man who wore a uniform and promises like cologne. He left. The promise stayed. So did the baby. In those days, an unmarried pregnant girl could lose everything: family, job, church, her very name. She became a story other people told in lowered voices. My grandmother refused to let that happen. So she did something both brutal and loving, the way some medicine burns going down. She told her older daughter Rose, "This is your chance. The doctor said you couldn't, but God has sent you this way. You will raise this child as your own." And she told her younger daughter Anna, "You will let her." Have you ever realized that the people who raised you were also once standing on the edge of choices that would change the shape of your entire life? Anna said yes. Maybe she thought she had no choice. Maybe the yes stuck in her throat like a bone. Maybe it tasted like sacrifice. She went away to have the baby, somewhere no one knew her. When she came back with that green suitcase and that too big blue dress, the baby did not come back with her. The baby was already here, in the old house, in Rose's arms. That baby was me. Take a breath. I'll wait. Yes. The woman you called Great-Grandma Rose was not my birth mother. The woman you called Great-Aunt Anna was. I did not find that out from a pointed conversation or a slip of the tongue. I found out because of the key. Because of the photograph. Because of the letter. Because secrets do not always die when people do. Sometimes they write themselves down and wait. Fast forward with me now. I am 21 years old. It is August. The air is thick enough to drink. Your grandfather and I are engaged, though I still keep the ring in my pocket more than on my hand, as if I'm afraid I'll lose myself if I wear it all the time. My grandmother Lillian has been dead 6 months. My mother, Rose, is not the same since. She moves like the house is heavier. We've decided, or rather, life has decided for us, that it is time to sell the old house where I was born. My parents will move in here, into this house, the one I now sit in. Which means we must clean out the old one. Room by room. Memory by memory. Have you ever cleaned out a house after a death, and felt like every drawer you open is a small act of betrayal? We spent days at it. We found grocery lists from 1952. We found one old blue shoe with no mate and a jar of buttons that had outlived their garments. We found photographs of people no one could name anymore. I was in the kitchen, taking down curtains stiff with time, when my mother called from the hallway. "Evie, would you get that picture down? The one by the back door. I'll put it up in the new place." I turned. There it was. The black and white photograph of the old house. The key hanging from its nail like a tired sentinel. I'd seen it all my life, but in that moment, with cabinets bare and floor streaked with dust where heavy furniture had once stood, it looked strangely naked. Like a coat on a hook with no person to warm. I went over, reached up, and took the key in my hand. For the first time, no one said, "Put the key back." My fingers tingled. The brass was warm, though the room was cool. I slid the key off the nail, feeling its weight settle in my palm. The photograph sagged forward a little without the counterweight. I lifted it off its nail too, turning it around in my hands. The frame's back was rough and dusty. In one corner, the cardboard looked odd. There was a thin, almost invisible slit, the edges of the cardboard bowing up the slightest bit, like a lip after it's been bitten. I frowned, rubbed at the dust, and my thumb caught on something that wasn't quite flat. There was paper there. Not the photograph. Something hidden between the picture and the backing, just thick enough to disturb the surface. A splinter of memory slid through me then, the image of my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt at the table with the key and the paper and the upside-down frame. The way they'd fallen silent when I stepped into the doorway. I swallowed. "Mom?" I called. No answer. They were in the bedroom packing clothes, laughing at some old dress. Far away. My heart started beating double time. Do you know that feeling when you sense you are standing at the threshold of something that will divide your life into before and after? That was the feeling. I looked down at the key in my hand. At the slit in the cardboard. At the empty kitchen, the echo of my footsteps swallowed by the old wood. And then, very carefully, I slid my fingernail under the edge of the cardboard and pulled. The cardboard lifted with a soft tearing sound. Behind it, the back of the photograph gleamed smooth and white. And nestled between the two, folded into a small, tight packet, was a piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, soft from pressing against time. My breath left me. For a second, all I could hear was the ticking of the kitchen clock and the rustle of something very old shifting its weight. I eased the paper out. It was softer than I expected, as if it had been handled many times before being hidden. There was a faint brown stain in one corner, maybe tea, maybe tears. The smell hit me next, dust, old ink, and that particular sweetness of paper that has waited too long. On the outside, in my grandmother's neat, slanted hand, were 4 words. For Evelyn, if found. My name. Not for my granddaughter. Not for the child. For Evelyn. My fingers started to shake. If your name had been on it, would you have opened it? I suspect you would have. I did. With the key still warm in my palm, I unfolded the letter. The creases fought me at first, trained by years of being kept closed. But finally, the paper lay open in my hands. The ink had faded from black to a soft, tired brown, but the handwriting was clear, looped and feminine and painfully familiar. It was my Aunt Anna's. I will read you the first line exactly as I read it then, standing in that half-empty kitchen with dust motes floating like reluctant angels. My dearest Evelyn. If you are reading this, it means the house has finally let go of us. My heart stopped. My aunt had never written me a letter in her life. She lived 5 miles away, she never needed to write. First, the letter said, "Forgive me for not telling you this while I could look you in the face. I am a coward in some ways and your mother, our mother, was not. She believed this secret should die with us. I believed. I am not sure what I believed. So I wrote it down instead, and we hid it here, where only someone stubborn as you would ever find it. Have you ever felt words crawl up your arms as you read them, like ants carrying pieces of your old life away?" I kept reading. By the time you read this, I will be old, or gone, or stranger to you than I ever wanted to be. Maybe you will be clearing out the kitchen, complaining about how much junk your grandmother kept. Maybe you will curse me for adding one more thing to sort. But this is not junk. This is the story of you. The story you have been told is that Rose could not have children and that God, in his mysterious kindness, gave her you. That story is almost true and therefore dangerous. Almost truths cut sharper than lies. I remember bracing myself against the counter, the edge digging into my hip, the key biting into my palm as I squeezed it. The whole truth is this. You were born from my body. I am your mother. I gasped. The old house went quiet in a new way, as if it were holding its own breath alongside me. All those years of calling her Aunt Anna. Of watching her drift in and out of our lives like a visiting storm, all laughter and sudden disappearances. Of feeling some strange, unspoken bond with her that I couldn't name. In one sentence, they rearranged themselves. Inside my head, something protested, "No, that's not right, that's not how the story goes." But inside my chest, something smaller and more stubborn whispered, "Of course." Have you ever had a truth land in you that hurts and comforts at the same time? I read on, eyes blurring. I was 19 and foolish when I met your father, she wrote. He wore a soldier's uniform and carried his childhood in his pockets like marbles. He said the war was almost over and that when he came back, we would marry and have a little house with red curtains and at least 3 children, maybe 4. He left with my heart and a promise. Only one of those returned. When I knew you were growing inside me, I was not afraid at first. I thought, he will come back, we will marry, and all will be forgiven. But months went by with no letter. News came that his unit had been lost in a place with a name I could not pronounce. In our town, girls like me did not keep babies without husbands. Or if they did not stay in town. The words tightened. I could feel her hand pressing harder into the pen even across the years. Your grandmother, Lillian, is a hard woman, but she loved me. She sat me down at this very table and told me the truth of the world as she saw it. If you keep this baby, you will lose your name here. But your sister, your good, married, church-going sister, cannot have children, and it is breaking her. We can fix two problems at once. Give her the baby. Give her the story. Let the neighbors see what they want to see. I screamed. I cried. I called her cruel. Maybe she was. But she was also right. There was no good choice, only less terrible ones. In the end, I said yes because I loved you and I wanted you to grow up loved, not whispered about. So we built a lie together. I could see them then, my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, 3 women in a kitchen, building a lie the way other women bake bread, kneading it until it rose enough to feed us all. Sometimes love is the lie we tell to keep a child safe. My eyes burned. We told the town that Rose was expecting, the letter went on. We bought her dresses 2 sizes too big and padded them. We closed the curtains. We let people imagine what they wanted. I went away to a home for girls in trouble, though no one said that out loud. There, in a white room that smelled like bleach and despair, I labored. When they put you in my arms, you were too small and too furious, yelling at the world for daring to make you exist. I loved you so much in that moment that I thought my ribs would break. Then, 2 days later, I handed you to your sister. I had to stop reading there. The room was spinning. I pressed my forehead to the cool wood of the cabinet, trying to breathe through the knowledge that my first act in this world had been to be handed from one mother to another like a secret parcel. Have you ever realized that a story you've heard all your life was missing its most important page? I forced myself to keep going. I told myself it was only for a while, she wrote. That one day, when you were grown and strong and the world had softened, would sit you down and tell you the truth. But the years passed, and the world did not soften. Your grandmother forbade it. It will only hurt her, she said. Let her have one mother, not 2. And then I watched you love Rose. The handwriting shifted there, the letters going taller, like she was straining for height she didn't possess. You clung to her skirts. You called her Mama in that high, certain voice. When you scraped your knee, you ran to her. When you brought home drawings, you showed her first. Every time I thought, now I will tell her, I would see you asleep in her lap, the same way you had once lain in mine, and my courage would evaporate. Who was I to take that from you? From her? So I made a second choice, smaller but in some ways more terrible. I chose silence. Silence, my darling, can be inherited like eye color. We all learned it. We spoke around the truth like it was a piece of furniture in the middle of the room we refused to see. Your grandmother made me promise never to tell you. She made Rose promise too. She said it would only cause pain, that it would not change the past. She took the old front door key, the one that no longer opened anything, and said, "This can be the guardian. We will hide the truth where it belongs, in the house itself." We wrote this letter together. I wrote the words. Rose watched. Your grandmother cut the slit in the frame. We folded the paper, slipped it inside, and hung the key on the nail. You will never speak of this, she said. If she finds it, then it is God speaking. At that line, my vision blurred so much I had to blink hard. I looked up at the photograph of the house, its black and white lines steady and indifferent. I looked down at the letter, alive and shaking in my hands. God or not, it was me who had found it. And suddenly, the key in my palm felt as heavy as the world. The letter went on, softer now. If you hate me after reading this, I will understand. If you feel that your whole life has been a trick, I will understand. But I beg you, Evelyn, do not hate Rose. She is more your mother than I ever was, in the ways that count day to day. She packed your lunches. She sat up with you when you had a fever. She worked jobs she hated so you could have new shoes. She was the one you broke with your teenage words, the one you will break again one day when you leave this house. I gave you blood and pain and the softest parts of my heart. She gave you everything else. If you can, hold us both in your heart somehow. One is the woman who brought you here, one is the woman who kept you here. As for your father, I cannot tell you much. His name was Thomas. He had a laugh that made you forgive him before he'd done anything wrong. He belonged more to the road than to any woman. If he is alive when you read this, I do not know if he deserves to know you. If he is dead, then he is with whatever God we answered to when we made all these terrible, loving choices. There is one thing I am sure of, you were not a mistake. You were the best thing I ever did, even if I did it badly. Forgive me when you can. And if you ever feel the weight of this lie pressing on you, remember, we were trying to spare you a different kind of weight. Whether we were right or wrong, only you can decide now. All my love, always. Anna. When I finished reading, I realized I was crying so hard I couldn't see the words anymore. The letter trembled in my hands. The key dug crescent moons into my palm where I'd been gripping it. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming, though I hadn't made a sound. Have you ever stood in the same room and yet felt like you had been dropped into a completely different life? That's what it was like. I looked around that kitchen, the scuffed linoleum, the chipped sink, the crooked cabinet door where your great-grandfather once bumped his head, and every memory rearranged itself around a new center. The story I'd been told. A miracle baby for a barren couple. A blessing out of nowhere. The story I now held in my hands. A bargaining chip in a deal between three women and the world. A child loved enough to be lied over for a lifetime. Both were true. Both were incomplete. I folded the letter slowly, following its old creases as if that could somehow fold the truth back into hiding. It didn't work. There is no way back from a truth like that. Evie. My mother's voice drifted down the hallway. Light, casual, unaware that the ground beneath her daughter's feet had just cracked open. I wiped my eyes with the back of my wrist, crumpling the corner of the letter in my haste. I shoved the folded paper into the pocket of my dress without thinking. The key, too. Yeah? I called, amazed that my voice sounded almost normal. Did you get the picture down? Yes, I said. I wasn't sure if it was a lie. I stared at the empty nail in the wall. The photograph sat on the counter, face down, its backing peeled open like a wound. In that moment, I made my own terrible, loving choice. I slipped the letter back into the frame. I slid the cardboard over it as best I could. I pressed along the edges to make it look untouched. Then I picked up the photograph, carried it to the hallway, and hung it back on its nail with trembling hands. But I did not return the key. I slipped the brass into my pocket and told myself it would only be for a little while, just until I could figure out what to do. I didn't know then that, a little while, would turn into a lifetime. That night, after the house was quiet and my parents were asleep, I took the key out and set it on my bedside table. By the dim light of a cheap lamp, I read the letter again. And again. Each time, different words cut deeper. I am your mother. Silence can be inherited. Do not hate Rose. It felt like there was no place in me large enough to hold both my love and my anger. Have you ever loved someone and been furious with them at the exact same moment? I thought of Rose, of my mother, standing at the sink all those years ago telling me, some doors stay locked whether the house is standing or not. I thought of Aunt Anna, my mother, laughing in the yard with me, teaching me to whistle through my fingers, vanishing for weeks, months, only to appear at holidays with loud gifts and louder stories. Which one of them did I belong to? Which one belonged to me? Sleep never came. Just before dawn, with birds starting to argue in the trees, I made another decision. I would confront Anna. It took me 2 days to gather the courage. On the third day, with the key burning a hole in my pocket and the folded letter tucked into my bra where no one could accidentally see it, I walked to her apartment. It was up 2 flights of crooked stairs above a bakery that always smelled like warm sugar and regret. Her door was painted a tired green, the number hanging slightly crooked. I raised my hand to knock and, for a second, almost turned away. But then I thought of the girl in the white room, handing over her baby. And I knocked. The door opened on the second knock. Anna stood there in a faded robe, her hair pulled up with a pencil, a cigarette burning in the ashtray on the windowsill behind her. "Evie," she said, surprise lighting her face. "You're up early. Did your mother send you?" "Yes," I said. "No. It was both. It was neither. Can I come in?" Something in my voice must have told her this was not a casual visit. Her smile faltered. She stepped aside. The apartment was small and cluttered, alive with the mess of one person's life lived loudly in a small space, records stacked on the floor, a plant wilting bravely in the corner, a half-finished dress draped over a chair like a ghost. She poured us coffee into chipped mugs with cartoon cats on them. Mine rattled on the saucer as I held it. "What's wrong?" she asked finally, sitting across from me at the tiny table. "You look like someone told you the world is flat." I swallowed. "I found a letter," I said. She went very still. "A letter," she repeated. "Where?" "In the kitchen," I said. "In the old house. Behind the picture of the house." Her eyes closed, slowly, as if against bright light. When she opened them again, they were wet. "Did you read it?" "Yes," I whispered. The words seemed to shatter something between us. She didn't ask what it said. She didn't deny writing it. Instead, she laughed, one short, broken sound. "Of course you did. You were always too curious for your own good." Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "Evie," she said, her voice shaking, "I am so sorry." And just like that, the anger I'd been nursing like a coal flickered. I pulled my hand back. I took the letter from inside my blouse and laid it on the table between us. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "All these years. I've been living a half-truth." She stared at the folded paper like it was a snake. "Because your grandmother made us promise," she said. "Because she said it would ruin everything. Because I watched you grow up happy and I was afraid that putting my name on your pain would make it worse." "Happy?" I repeated. "Do you think I'm happy now?" Her face crumpled. "No," she whispered. "And I did that. We did that." "I know." There was a long, awful silence. "Who am I supposed to be angry with?" I finally asked. "You? Grandma? Mom? All of you?" She thought for a long moment. Then she said something I have carried with me ever since. "Be angry with the world that made us think this was the only way," she said. "Then, if you have any anger left over, you can give a little to me." Have you ever heard a sentence that makes you grow up in an instant? I looked at her then, not as the fun aunt, not as the tragic figure in a story about mistakes, but as a woman who had been given a choice between her name and her child and had tried to choose both and ended up losing parts of each. It didn't make it all right. But it made it human. We cried. We laughed a little in that hysterical way you do when your whole life has just changed and the coffee is still getting cold. In the end, I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my heart. "Do you want me to call you Mom?" She flinched as if struck. "No," she said softly. "Not now. Not like this. Keep calling me Anna. Or Aunt. Whatever feels safest for you. Rose has earned Mom. I gave you life. She gave you living. We don't have to steal from each other." Her eyes met mine. "But I would like it very much," she added, voice breaking, "if you would visit more often." So I did. We did not remake our relationship overnight. There were years of awkwardness, of too long hugs and too short visits, of words started and swallowed. I never called her Mom. But sometimes, in my head, when I smelled cigarette smoke and orange candy, the word would flutter up like a moth. I know this is a lot. Take another sip of tea. We're almost to the part where you come into the story, where this key and this letter stop being about my identity and start being about yours. Because secrets are never solitary. They ripple. Have you ever thrown a stone into a pond and watched the circles spread, touching shorelines you didn't even know were there? That's what this letter did to our family. For a while, nothing seemed to change on the surface. Rose, my mother, did not know that I knew. Anna did. My grandmother Lillian was already in the ground by the time I found the letter. She took her unyielding certainty with her. I carried the key in my pocket everywhere I went. Not the letter, that stayed hidden back in the frame, its edges now slightly frayed from being unfolded and refolded. But the key felt like something I could hold, something solid. Something that had shifted from guardian of silence to witness of truth. I finished school. I married your grandfather under a cheap arch decorated with paper flowers and real hope. On the night before the wedding, I sat with Rose in this very kitchen, our hands wrapped around coffee cups, our silence thicker than the steam. She looked tired, the way mothers of brides always do, not from the planning, but from the quiet inventory of their own lives it forces. I watched her, feeling the weight of what I knew and what she thought I didn't. Mom? I said. She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten I was there. Are you happy? I asked. With how everything turned out. Her eyes searched mine, too sharp for someone who didn't sense the edge we were tiptoeing along. What kind of question is that the night before your wedding? She said, attempting a laugh. I faltered. I feel like there are things I don't know. About you. About us. Her hand tightened around her cup. There are always things we don't know about our parents, she said. It's how the world works. Children look forward. Parents look backward. We don't always meet in the middle. I almost told her then. The words trembled on my tongue. I know. I know about Anna. I know about me. But then she reached across the table, laid her hand over mine, and said, very quietly. I have done the best I knew how, Evelyn. It was not always the best possible, but it was the best I could find in the dark. And I realized something. Telling her I knew would not change the past. It would only add one more regret to her already heavy list. So I made a choice of my own. I let her keep the story she'd built for herself, that she was my only mother in the ways that mattered. It wasn't the whole truth. But it was one we could both live in, side by side with the other truth folded quietly in my pocket. You may think that was cowardly. Sometimes, late at night, I do too. Have you ever held back a truth not to protect yourself, but to protect someone you loved from seeing themselves through harsher eyes? That is what I did. Years rolled on. You were born. I watched your tiny fists curl and uncurl around my finger. I thought of Anna, holding me in that white room, knowing she would hand me away. The first time your father put you in my arms, he said, say hello to Grandma. And a voice in my head added, and granddaughter. Because of course, that's what you are. You are my granddaughter. But if you follow the lines back far enough, from me to Anna, to Rose, to my grandmother, you are also the descendant of a secret. The key hung by the back door in this new house, just as it had in the old. The photograph came too. We put it up like a shrine, though no one would have dared use that word, with the key on its little nail, just as before. By then, I was the one who insisted, the key stays on the wall. Your father once joked, what is that thing, anyway? The key to the city? I smiled, my hand unconsciously touching the letters outlined through the frame. In a way, I said. Did I want to tell him? Yes. No. Both. I told your grandfather instead. On a quiet Sunday afternoon when the rain made the house feel smaller and truth felt a little braver. He listened, his brow furrowing the way it does when he's trying not to interrupt. When I finished, he let out a long breath. Well, he said. That explains a lot. What do you mean? The way Anna looks at you, he said. Like she's memorizing your face every time, just in case. The way your mother used to freeze whenever anyone mentioned you looked more like your aunt than her. The way you look at that damn key. We laughed. We cried. We decided not to tell anyone else yet. Maybe when the kids are older, we said. Then. Maybe when your mother passes. Then. Maybe after the holidays. Time slipped by, as it does. Excuses grew like vines over the door of that conversation. And now here we are. My grandmother is long gone. Anna died 10 years ago, her laugh still echoing in this kitchen when the radio plays certain songs. Rose followed a few years later, holding my hand, never knowing I had read the letter that bore all our names in invisible ink. The key stayed. The letter stayed. You grew up under this roof, under this photo, under this silent guard. I watched you step around the invisible furniture in our story, never knowing it was there. Maybe you felt something, the way I did as a child, a slight draft in the air when certain names were mentioned, a too long pause before certain questions were answered. Did you ever suspect there was more to us than we said? Tonight, I am tired of being the last person alive who remembers the first version of this story. I am tired of being the only one who knows that the word mother has always been plural for me. And I am very, very tired of this key being the heaviest thing in the house. So I am going to do what no one else in our family ever quite managed. I am going to take the key off the wall, and use it. Not on a door. On a silence. Watch. My hand shakes more now than it did when I was 21, but the gesture is the same. I reach up, curl my fingers around the familiar curve of the brass, and lift. For the first time since you were born, the hook is empty. The photograph sways slightly, momentarily unbalanced. I take it down too and lay it on the table between us. The back of the frame is more fragile now. The cardboard is yellowed, and the tape my grandmother used has dried and curled. With the gentleness you reserve for old wounds, I peel it back. Here it is. The letter. The same folded paper I held 40, 50 years ago, edges softer now, folds deeper, ink one shade paler. I place it on the table. This, I say, my voice shaking but steady, is what the key was guarding. You reach for it instinctively, then stop, glancing up at me. Can I? Yes, I say. But let me read it to you. Because letters can say a lot. But they cannot tell you how someone's voice broke when they wrote them, or how many nights they stared at the ceiling wondering if they'd done the right thing. That part, only I can give you. And so I read it aloud. I read you the opening, my dearest Evelyn, and I stopped to tell you about the way Anna curled her letters, about the day she taught me to write my name. I read you the part about the soldier with the marbles in his pocket, and I stopped to explain who he likely was and why I never went looking for him. I read you the bargain my grandmother proposed at that kitchen table and the one my mother and aunt accepted. I read you the sentences where she says, "You were the best thing I ever did, even if I did it badly." I read you the confession, "You were born from my body. I am your mother." I read you the plea, "Do not hate Rose. She gave you living." And as I read, I watch your face. At first, your eyes are wide with curiosity, like you're listening to a story about strangers. Then confusion knits your brow, the way it did when you were 5 and first realized your favorite fairy tale had a sad part. Then the moment comes, the line about me being the baby, Anna being my mother, Rose raising me as her own, and I see it land. Your mouth opens slightly. Your hand goes to your chest. The room falls silent except for my voice and the rustle of old paper. Have you ever watched someone's understanding of themselves shift in real time, like plates sliding under the earth? It is beautiful, and awful, and necessary. When I finish the last line, "Forgive me when you can," I fold the letter gently and place my hand over it. We sit in that quiet for a long moment. Then you speak. So, you say slowly, "That means." That means, I say, that the woman you know as your great-grandmother was, by blood, my aunt. It means that your great-aunt Anna was my mother, biologically. It means you come from a line of women who broke themselves a little trying to protect the ones they loved. Your eyes shine. With tears. With questions. Why didn't you tell us sooner, you ask. What were you so afraid of? I take a deep breath. I was afraid, I say, that if I opened this door, the wind would blow everything we'd built off the table. I was afraid you'd look at me and not know who I was anymore. I was afraid you'd look at my mother, the only grandmother you really remember, and decide she was a liar instead of a woman trying to find her way in a world that gave her bad roads. And now, you ask. Now, I say, I'm more afraid of dying with this still locked inside me. Of leaving you to find it by accident, without my voice here to tell you the whole of it. The fallout begins quietly. It is not a slammed door or a shattered plate. It is a series of small implosions behind your eyes. I'm so angry, you say finally, surprising yourself with the honesty. At who? I ask gently. I don't know, you admit. At everyone. At no one. At that stupid key. We both laugh, a harsh, grateful sound. That's fair, I say. I've been angry at it too. You pick up the key from the table, turning it over in your hands for the first time without anyone telling you to put it back. It's just metal, you say. All this over, this? Not over the metal, I correct softly. Over what it let us hide. And over what it protected you from, maybe. Protected me, you echo. How did this protect me? Imagine, I say, if I had grown up as the illegitimate child of a girl who made mistakes, in a town that loved gossip more than truth. Imagine if I had known from the start, and every argument, every slammed door, every teenage tantrum became, well, you're not even really my mother. Imagine if my grandmother had died thinking we all hated each other for the choices she forced us into. You nod slowly, the anger not gone, but kneeling now, listening. So they were wrong, you say, but they weren't monsters. No, I say. They were just imperfect. Like the rest of us. Over the next hour, the questions come in waves. Did you ever meet your father? No. Do you want to? He's almost certainly dead by now. And even if he weren't, I'm not sure the man he became deserves to meet the woman I became. Did Grandma Rose know that you knew? I don't think so. I let her believe I accepted her version. It was a kindness I could give her. How did this change how you saw Anna? At first, it made me furious. Then it made me see her clearly, for the first time not as the fun aunt, but as a woman who had made a choice no one should have to make. Would you ever do what she did? Give up a baby? I pray I would never be asked to. I don't know. I know only that I have lied for less. Are there birth certificates? Papers? Yes. Somewhere, in a box, under a different name, with different dates. Paperwork to make the lie official. Are there more secrets? I smile sadly. There are always more secrets. But none as big as this one. Have you ever watched the person you thought you were become more complicated in the span of an afternoon? It is exhausting. It is freeing. I can see both happening in you. By the time the sun starts slanting through the kitchen window, turning the dust in the air to gold, your anger has softened into something else, grief, maybe. Not grief for a person, exactly, but for a story you thought was simple. I used to think our family was boring, you say with a bitter little laugh. Trust me, I answer, boring is a blessing. But no family is as simple as it looks in the photo album. You trace the edge of the photograph of the old house, your fingertip hovering over the little porch where my grandmother once stood with that key in her hand, making decisions that would echo down to you. So what happens now, you ask? What do we do with this? That is the question, isn't it? What do we do with truths dug up from under old foundations? Do we rebury them, or do we plant something in the hole? Here is what I suggest, what I hope. First, we forgive who we can, when we can. Not because they deserve it, always, but because carrying their sins in our pockets will only make our own keys heavier. Second, we stop pretending that silence is the same thing as peace. It isn't. Silence is just noise turned inward. It leaks out in little ways: sharp tones, cold shoulders, anxious children who feel something is wrong but can't name it. We can choose not to do that anymore. Third, we change what the key means. It has spent its entire second life guarding a secret. Let's give it a third life as a reminder. Not of shame, but of survival. Of women making impossible choices in a world that gave them bad options. Maybe we put it in a shadow box with the letter behind glass this time, not cardboard. Maybe we hang it where everyone can see it and say, "Ask me about that." Maybe we tell this story at holidays, not as gossip, but as inheritance. What do you think? I ask you. You sit with it for a long time. Finally, you nod. I don't want to bury it again, you say. It hurts, but it also makes me feel like I come from something strong. Messy, but strong. Good, I say. Because I am tired of being the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking. We both smile. You pick up the key one more time, weighing it in your palm. It's so light, you murmur. For something that held so much. I nod. That's the thing about objects, I say. They can't feel what we load onto them. Only we can. You look around the kitchen then, really look, as if seeing it for the first time, at the clock that ticked through all those silent years, at the chair where your father once rocked you to sleep, at the shelf where you hid your report card in 5th grade because you were afraid of disappointing us. How many stories are hiding in this house, you ask softly. More than we could tell in one night, I answer. But we can start with this one. So here is where I turn, just a little, from you at this table, to whoever is listening beyond it. Maybe you're just a visitor to our lives, hearing about keys and letters and women who lied out of love. Maybe, though, you're thinking of your own house. Have you ever looked at an object in your home, a recipe card, a chipped mug, a photograph slightly askew, and felt that it was watching you back, heavy with a story no one has told you yet? We like to think our families are built on facts: who was born when, who married whom, who lived where. But so often, they are built on agreements. On stories told and retold until they feel like truth, even when they are only the best version someone could bear to speak at the time. The question isn't whether your family has secrets. The question is, what will you do with them, when they finally rattle the key in their lock and ask to be let out? Will you turn away? Or will you sit down at a kitchen table, pour some tea, and do your best to meet them with both honesty and grace? As for us, we decide, that night, to keep the letter out. Not tucked back into the frame like contraband, but in a small wooden box on the shelf, where any of you, one day, can ask to see it. We put the photograph of the old house back on the wall, but this time, we leave the nail at the top bare. The key, we move. We put it in a new frame, on its own, with a small card underneath. On the card, in my shaky handwriting, we write. The key that did not open a door, but opened a story. In time, perhaps, your children will ask about it. And you who sat here with me tonight, listening to the worst and best I've ever said, will tell them. You will decide how. You will choose which edges to soften and which to leave sharp. But you will not pretend there is nothing to tell. In that way, the key's job has changed. From guardian of silence, to symbol of truth. If you have listened this far, if you have sat with us through generations of fear and love and paper and metal, I'd like to ask you for something small in return. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own family's unsaid things, please tap the like button. It tells the quiet little corners of the internet that stories like this, stories from dust of old days, are worth listening to. And if you'd like to hear more grandmother voices, more keys and letters and photographs that don't mean what you think they mean, consider subscribing to this channel, Dust of Old Days. Think of it as hanging another key on your wall, a small promise that we'll keep coming back here together, unlocking the rooms our hearts have been afraid to enter. Before we finish, there's one more thing I want to leave you with. You are not the sum of the secrets that were kept from you. You are the sum of the choices you make once you know. My grandmother, my mother, my aunt, they all did the best they could with the light they had. Some of their choices hurt me. Some of mine have hurt you. But tonight, sitting here, key and letter on the table between us, I feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. I feel lighter. Truth doesn't erase the past, but it can soften its edges. Look around your own home, when this is over. Ask yourself. What object have we given a job it never asked for? What key have we hung up, day after day, without ever wondering what it really guards? And then, when you're ready, only when you're ready, take it down. Turn it over in your hands. And listen. Because sometimes, the heaviest stories in a family are hidden in plain sight, behind the most ordinary things. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything, is the courage to read the letter.